Welcome to Krea Psychology Psychology Talks. And today we are glad to welcome Professor McDonald from Fulbright University in Vietnam. And he's going to talk about a very interesting topic, which is titled as Positivity Discourses, Consumer Culture, and Women in the Global South. And we have mostly students from the course Consumer Psychology Economy. That's what I can see. There are few new faces. So a quick introduction to the speaker. Professor McDonald is a professor of social psychology of the psychology program at Fulbright University, Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam. His current research interest includes the application of continental philosophy, existentialism, and critical theory in particular to social psychology and the application of social psychology to work and leisure. Matthew has published numerous books, including Critical Social Psychology and Introduction, and Social Psychology and the Theories of Consumer Culture, a Political Economic Perspective, which happens to be one of the major books that we have referred in this course as well. He has published in range of journals, including journals of the Theory of Social Behavior, Journal of Humanistic Psychology, Social and Personality Psychology Compass, and Gender, Technology and Development. And I must thank personally Matt for accepting my request to come and provide this guest lecture at a short notice. Thank you, Matt, for this. I really appreciate it. Over to you.
Hi, everyone. You all look wonderful. I see it's all a bit earlier there. So what I'll do is I'll just put up the slides and hopefully everyone can see what's going on.
Yes, you can see.
Is that all good?
Yes.
All right. Okay. Look, I should just say apologies if I didn't have the title of consumer culture in there. This was the title of the article that we just submitted, but don't worry, it's going to be very relevant to your particular course. But yeah, look, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to come and see you all. It's not every day that I get to sort of travel halfway around the world and be with a group of people like this in this particular format. I thought just to start off with, I'm actually from Australia, and you'll see there's a star there. Actually, that's where I'm from is what's actually the capital of Australia, which is called Canberra. Most people tend to think it's actually Melbourne or Sydney, but that's actually not the case. So Canberra is quite a small town, and it's unusual for Australia too, because it's very cold and it snows, and there's ski resorts there and all of that sort of thing. So it's not like the kind of normal thing that you get with like beaches in Australia. Now, I've also given you a map there. So at the moment, I'm actually based in Vietnam. So I'm based in Ho Chi Minh City. So I just wanted to give you those maps just to start off with. Just a couple of things before I start. Feel free at any time to stop me if you want, and if you want to ask a question. Also, too, I should say that I have a kind of a bit of a bad habit in that sometimes I will speak too fast and I'll start getting very excited about what I'm saying, and you might not get my meaning. So please, at any time, feel free to stop me and just say, and you can just call me Matt. Just say, oh, Matt, can you just hold up a bit? Could you explain that again? Or if you want me to clarify something, and so on. And one of the things I'd like to do is, for me, I think this topic certainly has relevance for all of you, because I'm looking at this particular topic in the Global South. So I'd be really keen for anything that you have to offer about what's going on where you are, because certainly, the topic is on women in the Global South. So we have a kind of a shared regional aspect there in terms of what we're looking at. Anyway, so let's move on. I've got, I'll probably speak for about 45 minutes, but as I said, please jump in if you've got any questions at any time. I'm going to start by just introducing the idea of positive psychology. And then I'm going to talk about the basis of this particular research that we just did. We just submitted a journal article on positivity discourses. I'm then going to talk about these discourses and how they've been functioning in the global north But in particular, North America and Western Europe. And then I'm going to move to the global South. And in the global South, there's much less research in that area. And so this is one of the reasons why I picked up on this topic. I'll talk about commodification, which, as I understand from looking at the course guide that you have, that some of you will know a bit about that. And then I'll finish off with some key questions. One of the things about this piece of research, it was just an initial piece of research. And so the way I ended or concluded was that actually what I found was that my research posed more questions than it actually answered. So in that respect, it was kind of a bit different. All right, so let's talk about positive psychology. So this is by far the largest growing area of psychology. And as I mentioned, certainly in Western Europe and North America, and certainly in Australia, where I'm from, and New Zealand, the numbers of books and articles that are now being written is absolutely huge. One of the things about, if you haven't come across positive psychology, and although you are studying a consumer psychology course, one of the things that happened in the early days, psychology was about positive human functioning. But after World War II in the United States, the government there decided that they wanted psychologists to spend much more time and energy focusing on psychopathology. So usually when you study psychology, most people think that you're going to study Freud and anxiety disorders and depression and these sorts of things. And so what happened was, the reason why psychology went down that path was because the American government was putting so much money into psychopathology. And then it wasn't until about the early or sort of late 80s, early 90s, that this topic of positive psychology started to become about. And many psychologists were saying, you know, we're focused too much on psychopathology. We actually need to focus on, you know, what makes life worth living, as I've got there from the definition. And then looking at that from both the individual perspective and the societal perspective. Now, what I've actually found with positive psychology is in Vietnam, and I suspect it would be the case in I suspect it would be the case where you guys are as well, that it's not necessarily big in the academic area, but what it's done is it's filtered its way through into lots of different public domains and areas of life. And one of the things that I did notice was that reading some of the very sort of popular women's magazines in both China, Vietnam, and also India, that you can see that a lot of this area of psychology is starting to filter down, and it's starting to make itself present in the types of things that people are writing about. And so this is one of the things that I'm particularly interested in. Okay, so in terms of our research, or my research, so what I was particularly interested was this was a study looking at language. And I know that probably sounds really boring, and it probably is for some people, but so we didn't go out and interview people. What we were doing is we were looking at magazines, telephone apps, books, and all of these sorts of things. And we're sort of looking at, okay, how are these particular ideas filtering down? How are they targeting women, and whereabouts are we finding them? And so what we found, and this again is something which has become very popular in Western Europe and North America, is that there's this whole kind of movement now, which is sort of targeting women to try and get them to experience sort of greater positive emotions. So things like inspiration and optimism, but also positive personality traits. Actually, and this is more the important area, because things like, it's kind of considered that things like self-esteem and resilient is something that actually women are lacking. And that's kind of something that's again big in North America and Western Europe. So our question was very simple. We just wanted to sort of look at, okay, this is an emerging movement. It's kind of exported itself from the global north, and we're now seeing it in the global south. So what's actually going on here? And our focus was on Vietnam and China. But now that I've actually done some research on India, I'm also finding that it's also filtering down there. So so that's what we wanted to look at. So it was fairly wide ranging. Now, I suppose one of the questions, whenever you do a piece of research, someone is always going to say, the main question is, well, so what? Who cares? Why are you doing that? You know, like, is this just going to be some interesting intellectual exercise for you? So what we're saying is that this is very, very important because it is emerging. And because of that, what effect is it having on women's psychology? But in particular, what effect is it having on their sense of self in terms of how are these discourses changing the way women think about themselves, like their values, their beliefs, their worldview, the ways that they try and behave, the sorts of people that they look up to? So these things can be potentially quite transformative if they really start to take hold and become very popular. All right, so that was just to give you a kind of a bit of a an introduction into the study and what we were sort of looking at there. All right, now I've got 3 important caveats here, and it's again, it's very interesting for me lecturing about this in places like China, Vietnam, and India. That firstly, on the topic of when it comes to positive emotions and positive personality traits, myself and my colleagues, we're very ambivalent about this in that, by the way, I'm about to start critiquing this material and talking about where the potential dangers are. But having said that, though, you know, we all want women to experience positive emotions. We want them to feel confident and empowered and resilient. And that is certainly the case. That's certainly the case for, you know, young girls in Vietnam in the sort of picture that you can see here. That's the first thing. So we're ambivalent about. We definitely want women to experience these positive things, but we also want to make sure that they're involved in changing public policy and other things, which I'll talk about in a moment. The other thing too, of course, now, where I come from in Australia, Australia is actually quite a wealthy country. And although we have poverty, we certainly don't have poverty on the levels that other countries do. And so one of the things too, and I think why this is such an interesting course for you guys where you are to be learning about this is that we also want, although we might critique aspects of consumer culture, having said that, though, we want everyone to have safe and secure housing. We want everyone to have electricity, clothing, enough to eat, and clean water, and so on. Now, I would suggest, and this is just sort of my particular take on it, and people might disagree with this, but I would tend to say that consumer culture in that respect is different, because when you're consuming the necessities of life, I wouldn't say that there's definitely a particular culture around that in the same way when you're actually consuming things which aren't necessary for life, okay? So, I mean, here's a good example. I mean, this is crazy, but I have 2 iPhones, you know, and someone might say, well, do you really need 2 iPhones? And I don't. But I suppose the other thing too would be to say that an iPhone is a classic piece of consumer culture, because having an iPhone, what I'm doing is I'm saying to the world, you know, I'm an iPhone kind of guy. You know, what I'm communicating to the rest of the world is that I'm communicating maybe some of the values and beliefs of the Apple company, you know, and so that's where I think consumer culture is different. So we're talking about consuming non-necessary items, but also too that we're also, when we consume these particular items, we are conferring a particular identity. So the type of car that you drive, even the university that you go to, that is signaling to the rest of the world where you are in the kind of social hierarchy in terms of the amount of money that you have. And also too, it's you are communicating to the world what your taste is and so on. And so what that kind of sets up is, firstly, you're enhancing your status by having these, you know, particularly expensive gadgets like these. But the other side to it as well, of course, is that we all suffer status anxiety, because there are always people in the world that always have more than we have. So anyway, I would say, you know, for me, that would be the difference. But I just want to put it out to the class. Would everyone agree with me about that? Do you think do you think there is a difference there, or do you think that there's a real gray area there and that it's really hard to separate?
Matt, can you repeat your questions? I think that will be better.
No, I was just interested that, do you think that's an important caveat to make in countries like India and China and Vietnam, you know, that aren't as wealthy? Because I suppose that's the thing I always get worried about, is that, you know, if you're going to criticize if you're going to criticize consumer culture, yeah, you have to be careful, because I always become afraid that people are going, well, wait on, you're Australian, you're a white guy, you have everything that you need in life, you don't have to worry. What about the people that don't have a safe house and all of those sorts of things? And so I suppose that's why I think it's important to make that point. But I'm just wondering, is that something that you guys look at in terms of consumer psychology, or yeah, do you do make that distinction?
Yeah, I think the question is like whether you see examples of consumer culture in India or not, right? You know, whether there is this differences. So, what do you say?
Yeah, and also too that I mean, is there a negative connotation on it as well, or is it just the case that, well, actually, if you do have that sort of money and you can buy those things, well, you're obviously just very lucky and quite fortunate?
I think, at least for some Indians, a part of consumer culture is sort of moving out of our country and moving into a better developed country. I think that distinction exists, and it also exists within our own parameterization of how we look at consumer culture and what the top really is for us. I don't think that exists for example, a citizen of the United States who has regular exposure to, okay, you can take Tim Hortons, for example. Tim Hortons is one of Canada's most famous coffee serving chains, and it just started in India. And going to Tim Hortons, going to Starbucks is an important part of our consumer culture. It marks a sort of development, it marks a sort of stage. But in Canada and the US, it's a pretty regular thing to do that. So I think that distinction does exist. I certainly think that the level of development in every country does impact consumer culture in that regard. But I also think that the lower echelons of society would perhaps not be able to experience that purely because they're not exposed to it. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, actually, look, that's a really wonderful point that you made, and I was just putting it down there because it's the same thing in Vietnam, that consumer culture in many respects actually means engaging with globalized culture. And particularly in Vietnam, because Vietnam was a closed communist country for many years. So when Vietnam opened up in the late 80s, one of the really interesting things from the research that I've done is that, particularly with young women in Vietnam, they see that embracing consumer culture, it's not just about embracing consumer culture, but it's also about embracing a modernized lifestyle, or a lifestyle that doesn't hark back to the old days of communism where there was absolutely nothing. And by the way, there's a really wonderful author, a guy called Sunil Bhatia, who's written a book on decolonizing psychology, and he talks about, it's a book published by Oxford University Press, but he talks about particularly that issue. So yeah, thank you for that. That's a great point. And anything else to add on that one?
Hi, Matt. Can you hear me?
Hi. Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So I think Abhyuday mostly covered what I wanted to say, but I have something else, like a point, which is, I don't know if it's really related to this, but, like if you are trying to study, consumer culture of a different culture and being an outsider to it, so there might be certain limitations, and one might argue, like related to your research question, what you are trying to research in Vietnam, and especially when you're looking at, women's condition or, women's well-being and all of that. So one might argue that, being a white male from another country, so what are some of the challenges that, one might face, or I don't know. something of that sort. So is it something that you have experienced or something that you might face in your research? So something of that sort. I mean, I don't know if I completely make a sense, but yeah.
Yeah, so if I'm sort of getting your question right, no, you're dead right. It very much changes from country to country. And one thing that I would say now is that, particularly say my own home country in Australia, I would say now that we're living in a post-consumer culture world. But what I mean by that, which is that what young people in Australia are most interested in is not actually collecting and buying things, because things like traditional things like home ownership, buying a car and stuff, young people are not interested in that stuff anymore. What they're actually interested in is buying experiences. And so to want to leave school and have that traditional life where you buy a house and a car and a boat and do all that sort of thing, that's kind of seen as a bit passé and not very cool anymore. And so the big thing that young people do is they'll do things like they will go backpacking and traveling in Vietnam, or they'll go backpacking and traveling into the Himalayas, or these sorts of things, or yeah, they're sort of more about collecting experiences. But having said that, though, that is a part of consumer culture in a sense, because you're spending money on particular things, and what those things then represent to others is that you're kind of saying, yeah, I'm not interested in material things, I'm just interested in having these really cool far out experiences. So in a place like Australia, what that accords is what we call cultural capital. You know, it's like, yeah, if you were to leave school and say, oh, well, I just left and got a job and did this and that, that'd be fairly boring. Whereas if you said, well, I left and then I went and, I went skiing and mountain climbing, in the Indian Himalayas or something, that would be much more of a cool thing to do, if that makes sense. So it definitely changes from country to country.
Yeah, thank you.
I just saw there was a question here on
chat.
yeah. This is a good question. The point just being made here about conspicuous consumption. Actually, thank you for reminding me of that term. That's a very important one. I should have had that in there before. You're right. Yeah, conspicuous consumption is all about making sure, that when I'm going out in Vietnam, I mean, not that I would do it, but if I did and I had the latest iPhone, that I would make sure that everyone saw my latest iPhone, and they would get a sense of, oh, wow, this guy must earn a lot of money and he's got good taste and all of that sort of stuff. So, yeah. Okay, and it's just talking about issues here about festivals and things. Yeah, okay. Yeah. So I suppose that's the other thing too with the religious. But by the way, a country like places like Vietnam are not very religious at all. Whereas obviously places like India and Pakistan and other parts of the sort of South Asian area are much more religious. So yeah, so again, if that may well be something that is according you or according people like yourself and your family, if you're going off on religious pilgrimages and things, again, I would imagine that would confer on you a particular level of sort of cultural capital, and that's something that people want, of course. All right, so I'll just move on. Yeah, so I just wanted to get those points out of the way, because once I start getting in and criticizing, yeah, I'm obviously just keen to make sure that I certainly would never criticize the idea that people would need to have the basics in life, and that's very important. Okay, so I'll talk about what's been going on in the global north. So obviously, it's very ubiquitous. Now, what you find in many places is that when you actually go out and buy products, once upon a time, it used to be, so there's a couple of examples here. One is to do with exercise, like buying an exercise routine. Another one here is about buying makeup. One of the things here is that they're very much focused on also selling these sort of positive psychological aspects. Now, but the thing is, that is much more heavily targeted at women and not men. Like when you go and buy men's products, so let's say if I was going to buy this shirt, they wouldn't sell that shirt in a place like Australia, the United States, and say, if you buy this shirt, you are going to walk out and you are going to be a lot more confident, or you're going to increase your self-esteem. And I'll talk about that in a second. But this was another question that I wanted to ask, because everyone that's currently doing research in this area is kind of asking themselves the question that what that then assumes is that if we're going to sell products to women, and we're not only selling the actual product, but we're also selling some kind of positive psychological emotion or positive psychological personality trait, it would then suggest or assume that women tend to suffer thinking and feelings of inferiority when compared to men, low self-esteem, self-doubt, and also too, and this is another interesting one, that they also suffer much more negative self-talk than men. But I suppose one of the things that I would like to know is that, would you say that that is the case where you guys are? Like, is this something that you see, that if you were to do research that, let's say if you were to do a survey, would it sort of then turn out to say that, you know, if you're asking people like men and women, okay, what is your self-esteem like? Would it be the case that men would score higher on the self-esteem scores and women would score lower? Do you think that that would be the case where you are?
Hi. I think that it's right. Women would, if you do the research, women would essentially be on the lower end of it, because we come from a society, and not just our society, I think the world as a whole has had a lot of experiences where women have not been given the proper credit, where they have been discriminated, where they have been put down. And and especially I think in India, it is a known concept that women have to look a particular way, they have to act a particular way, they have to behave in a particular manner, they have to wear certain clothes. Those are restrictions that the society has. But I don't think that that's necessarily just in India, it's all over the world as well.
Yeah.
Definitely.
No, you're definitely right. It's not just an India thing. Yeah, of course. Yeah. Look, it's an Australia thing. It's a Vietnam thing. Yeah.
Because of that, I think that women will be on the lower end, and that is why they're targeted, because they are easy to target, because they've been targeted by the society itself as a whole. So targeting them in the advertisements is not that far-fetched.
Yeah, so, you know, if that is the case, then what we're sort of talking about is that, in a way, you know, like I said, this sense of ambivalence is that, well, then, you know, that would be a good thing, because like I said, you know, I would love to see more little girls in Vietnam and other parts of the world, you know, feel as self-confident. You know, one thing I'd have to say, though, too, like in Australia, you know, if you had a shirt like this and you sold it and it basically said that, you know, being a male, you're going to buy that shirt and you're going to buy self-esteem, that would totally not work as a marketing ploy, because the idea then would be, well, why would I buy that shirt? I'm a guy. My self-esteem is through the roof, you know, like, even if it isn't, like, Australian men are particularly bad in that respect, in that they like to pretend that they are, you know, that they're much more confident, they have much more greater self-esteem than they actually do. So there may be an issue there, that women are much more likely to report those things than men are, because I mean, certainly the case would be in Australia that men would suffer the same levels of depression and other mental illness in Australia. I suppose the difference is they're just much less likely to come forward and report it, mainly because you would be seen as having a weakness, you know, and obviously, and especially with men in Australia, they all like to think they're all tough guys and nothing gets to them. So, so there might be something going on there. But anyway, so this is the assumption that's been going on, and it's obviously been very successful, because when we look at these positivity discourses and these ideas that we want women to have greater self-esteem, we want to boost their self-confidence, we can then see that women represent a much more lucrative market for all of these types of products. So health and dietary and beauty products and these sorts of things. And again, and it's the same in India. And again, I think we'd all agree it's probably the same the world over. there are much greater pressures on women to look a certain way than there is for men. And so women in that respect, as I mentioned, are a bigger market. But one of the things, though, and something that's been, sort of going on in the global north for a long time, and particularly since the advent of psychology, there's this huge focus now on boosting people's psychological well-being. And so so when you marry those two things, this idea that women have low self-esteem and that we can link our product, that is our exercise product in the picture there, we can link that and say, if you purchase this product, you're not only getting, the health benefits of feeling mentally better and exercise, it's also going to boost your self-esteem. And now in Vietnam, what you generally see is, and this might just be an East Asian thing, in that it's certainly the case in Japan and Taiwan and other countries, and also much of China, that usually women are responsible for the household budget. And so it's women that will be going out and buying these things. And I think this is one of the reasons, again, why they tend to be targeted more than men. Okay. So I just sort of, I've got this picture here, and I think something that I would just like to put out to you all and just get your thoughts on this, if that's okay. Now, Dove, obviously a huge beauty product, huge around the world. They're one of the organizations, particularly in the global north, that have really spearheaded this whole kind of focus on boosting women's self-esteem, and particularly around body image being a big one. So when you go onto the Dove site, they have this Dove self-esteem project. Now, this sounds wonderful, but what do you all think? Do you think that Dove, the product, are they genuinely interested in boosting young women's self-esteem, or is this just a way for them to sell more products, do you think?
I think self-esteem as a concept is commodified by brands because they know that it's an essential human need which everyone is looking for to an extent. And that's why they've tried to commodify this and make this an advertising or a marketing tactic. When in reality, I don't think that I don't think purchasing products can ever be a long-term solution for fulfilling one's self-esteem.
Okay, and I think that what you've said there is really the crux of the work that's been going on in this area in the global north, and I'm going to introduce those authors in a moment. So yeah, I think what you've just said, you've very, very nicely summed up, I think, what the main issue is. By the way, I can share, I've got PDF copies of these two books that I can share with you, but here's a couple of authors here, Shani Orgat and Rosalind Gill. Rosalind Gill in particular, I really like her work, and I've been following her work for a long time. Again, she's very interested in media, consumer culture in these areas. So what they have observed, not only Shani and Rosalind, but also Sarah Bennett Weiser. So what they've sort of been saying is that while this has been going along, they were saying that in the last 10 years, we've seen a real steep increase in these efforts by societal institutions. So that would be government agencies, but also corporate organizations like Dove and NGOs, to target women with so the three big ones are confidence, so boosting self-confidence, empowerment, and then the other big one is resiliency. And so it's a multi-pronged thing. It's not just that products like Dove are doing. You'll see, like in the United States and Western Europe, you'll actually see a lot of government agencies and other government-sponsored organizations pushing this thing. And in fact, one thing I'd say too, and I'm sort of jumping ahead on this stuff has become really big. So in terms of one of the things that plays really well for aid organizations that are sending money to sort of poorer parts of the world is this whole thing about what we are going to do is, well, an important part of what we're going to do is really trying to build the confidence and empowerment of young women in those countries. Because if we can empower them, we're then going to get much better outcomes. And of course, all of the research conducted by the UN and other organizations tend to indicate that it's the most successful way of taking a country out of poverty is actually providing education for women. Now, obviously, then the criticism of that becomes is what we call this thing called psychologization. So what happens, though, is that the government and these other companies, NGOs, they're then advocating a turn inwards. So there's this focus then on people's psychology, and that if we change people's psychology, that is then going to improve the lot of women. And so many women are then led to believe that, I can become a feminist by boosting my confidence, boosting my empowerment, and so on and so forth. And so suddenly, because one of the things in Vietnam, there's no Vietnamese term for feminism, so that they use different terms. And feminism, the women's movement occurred in a different way. It didn't occur in the same way that it did in the West. But again, there's this idea that the best way that I can improve the lot of women is by building my own psychological resiliency or whatever it is, and then help others to do that. The problem then becomes that as women are then primarily focusing on their own psychology and boosting their own self-esteem, they are then sort of ignoring what are, say, the structural inequalities of a country, and that really where widespread change for women comes is actually through collective political action. It doesn't come from a change in their psychology. And Vietnam is a very classic example of this, because right up until 1945, Vietnam had actually been a colony of France. And then when the French left in 1945, they left for a period and they came back. One of the first things that happened was that during that colonial period, and it occurred within a sort of a Marxist-Leninist pushback against colonialism, within that was the women's movement. And then women advocated. So as soon as that change came, suddenly women could have no-fault divorce. Women were allowed to own property. There was a whole lot of very important legal changes, and it was those legal changes that really changed the position or the status of women in society. And so that's the main thing that these two authors are worried about, as well as others, that this turn inwards, this focus on positive psychology, is shifting the focus away from agitating for change in social policy and so on, and also change politically. Now, in a country like Vietnam, I know I'm not completely, obviously the political situation changes from country to country, but one of the things, China, it's obviously much more difficult, but in Vietnam, not so much, that the government is generally pro-women anyway. But again, there are still many changes that need to be made. I mean, one of the really big ones in Vietnam is laws around domestic violence. That there are laws here, but they're just not enforced. And so this is one of the issues that we see. So I suppose one thing I would ask then, given that particular criticism, would people say that this might also be a concern, would be a concern in other countries around the world, or in other places like India, for example, do you think?
So he's asking whether structural, as you become more individualistic, you tend to ignore the structural issues, right? Is it that in India or not, is what he's asking. So please.
Yeah. I don't think it's an issue currently. I think that has a lot to do with the flow of information, the flow of knowledge. I don't think that flow is very, for lack of a better word, flowy in this country particularly. I don't think that's a problem currently, but I do think purely based on the precedent which you mentioned in Europe and the United States, I do think it could potentially turn out to be a problem. But as of right now, I personally don't see it.
Yeah, and you're right. And look, I'm not really seeing it yet in Vietnam, and And so, but I think one of the reasons why I wanted to write this paper is to sort of say, well, because both of these authors are sort of talking about the export of positive psychology and these positivity discourses to the global South, and sort of indicating and wondering, well, you know, is there going to be a problem there? But no, I think it's the same. Look, I don't know enough about China. I haven't researched there enough. But again, it's not such an issue so much in Vietnam either. And the mechanisms by which political change happens here is quite different because, you know, Vietnam is a one-party state. It has a communist government. And so the way that change occurs is quite different as opposed to, say, you know, democratic countries like Australia and the United States. Yeah. All right, let's move on. So one of the things for me then, and why I was so interested in sort of looking at this topic is, as you can see here, I've in the last few years, I've published quite a bit on positive psychology. And while again, I think positive psychology is wonderful in many ways, I think also too, there are some potential dangers with it. And so this is something that I've sort of been publishing on in the last few years. And then also too, I've been very fortunate to have a number of young Vietnamese female PhD students. And so I've, because gender was never an issue that I ever published on. And so because of my PhD students, I was then getting involved in some of these studies. So looking at things like leadership in Vietnam, but something which I think is a bit much more germane to our particular topic today is that this particular study I did on gender relations and social media, what we were interested in is how do young women in Vietnam, how do they present themselves on Facebook? Because, you know, they tend to really curate their photos. They tend to really curate their the way they look, much more so than I've sort of noticed in other countries. But two big things struck me. Well, one which was going to be an obvious one, and that is the desire yeah, I suppose the desire to want to look as attractive, physically attractive as possible was very important. But the second one, which was a surprise for me, was that many of the women in their self-presentations, they were really keen to not come across as being negative in any way. So whenever there were debates on their Facebook pages about women's equality and like, for example, like if there was a debate that was going on about domestic violence or any of these sorts of things, most women the women that we interviewed were not keen to talk about it at all, because they didn't want to come across as being negative. They felt that it was really important that they came across as a sort of very positive type of person. And so this was something for me, which I found very interesting. And one of the things that I thought, well, maybe there is these positivity discourses are filtering down into Vietnamese society much more than I thought they were. And so, well, by the way, again, and just putting it out to you guys there, is this, would you see the same issue where you guys are? Like, is that, and maybe I'm talking to the ladies here, is it really important that you guys you know, is there a real desire? Look, and by the way, I'm the same. Obviously, I want to try and look as attractive as possible, but is the way that maybe you're judged primarily is on your looks on Facebook, for example? And again, is it something where if there was a debate going on about women's issues, is it something that you would want to avoid out of a fear of being seen as a negative person?
I think that on social media, be it Facebook or be it Instagram or be it anything, you try to portray this idea of your best possible self. You portray the perfect life and the perfect lifestyle. And I don't think that's generalized to US or Australia or even to India. I think that that's something that social media does everywhere, because what you see on social media is basically an ideal lifestyle that everyone presents. So I don't necessarily see that as being specific to any culture.
Yeah, look, and I think you're right. Although one thing where I would say that there is a divergence is that let's say if I'd done this same study in Australia, all of exactly the same things like what you very eloquently put there is that you are wanting to put your best or most ideal self forward. Although in Australia, and it wouldn't be the case with everyone, but there would always be a group that wouldn't be afraid to indulge in those. Like if they saw a post of something in the news or whatever, they wouldn't be so worried or concerned about saying that, saying something negative about something, saying, the government needs to change its policy, or, women are getting a bad deal. There's not the same sort of concern around that. Having said that, though, that's more of a minority of women. Most women, even in a place like Australia, would generally avoid that sort of thing. And again, as you're saying, would want to put that more ideal self forward. So, but the other thing too that I would say about that study as well, the one that we did on young women's use of social media and the way they curate their self-presentation is much of it wasn't just about being positive either. It was very much about coming back to these issues of that they feel that they are highly empowered, that they're confident and so on. And one of the reasons for that is that the women that we spoke to, they said that they often use, their Facebook is often used as a way to kind of to create a successful or winning profile when they go for a job. Whereas again, in Australia, that wouldn't be so much the case. But yeah, so it's sort of slightly different in that respect. All right. Now, sorry, I know this might seem a bit. Sorry. Yeah, is there a question? Yeah.
No, just continuing what the question that you asked. I think you already said that there are women who are not afraid of portraying how they are or what they feel about themselves, and they are empowered and confident in the way they look and not necessarily portraying their ideal self on Instagram or, for that matter, any other social media platform. For instance, I use Insta, but I'm not that active on Instagram. I mean, I don't post anything because I don't like the idea of posting or whatever that is. But the idea that features like Instagram or Facebook or in general, like a camera that you have on your phone, like a normal camera, it has filters, right? So that you can use filters. So this idea that something is accessible to you and then you can use it to enhance your looks or whatever filter or background that you want to use. So I think with technology and with such features, I think they might enhance your self-esteem or the idea of self, but they're also exploiting the idea. I mean, they might enhance your ideal self that you want to. Of course, it depends on individual how they want to portray themselves. But yeah, I just wanted to highlight the fact that there are women especially, who are not afraid of portraying their self that they believe in. Yeah.
Yeah. No, thank you for that.
Matt, one.
All right. Yeah, please. Yes.
I was just thinking aloud, like, as you said, like women in Vietnam is more in two minds in saying something, taking a political stand for that matter, right? I was just thinking whether it's the communist one-party government, how much that has a role to play to that whole thing. Because in India, there is actually this crowd in this affluent section who consider themselves woke, and they would rather prefer to comment on such so-called politically charged things, and that consider more desirable than not commenting on those things. So there is a class difference in terms of who are commenting on those things and who are not commenting on those things. So far we are fortunate to be in some form of democracy, whatever form it might be, but so that freedom is still there. That one can, although the government is regularly, penalizing individuals for putting things on Facebook or any other social media, but it is not so, I think, permissive as it might be in a communist government, I suppose. Although I don't have much idea about Vietnam in that sense.
No, you're dead right. You do need to be careful, and I need to be careful too in when I'm teaching my students as well. When I say careful, it's nowhere near as bad as it is in China. As I understand from my colleagues in China, you do need to be very careful. In Vietnam, not so much, but yes, you would want to be careful about what you would post. Like if you put a post up there that directly attacked the government, yeah, that would be. Look, by the way, people do it though all the time. What would be the problem is that if you came out and you attacked government policy about something, okay, that would be one thing. The problem would be if you started to then get people following you. And there was a very famous case here, this woman called Madam Mushroom. I won't explain why that's what she was called, but she got a huge followership on Facebook, and she and heavily critical of the government, particularly government corruption. Actually, that's one big thing you'd want to be careful about, calling out government corruption here. But she got a 10-year jail sentence, but she was very fortunate that the American government took her in, and so she moved to Vietnam. But you're right. So it's not only that idea of wanting to come across as being positive. Yeah, you'd want to be careful. You know, whereas obviously in a place like Australia, you can say whatever you like, and it doesn't really matter. So yeah, so it's a sort of a bit different in that respect. All right, I'm just moving on now, and I know what you're seeing here is in Vietnamese, so I'm going to do some sort of translation here for you. But well, actually, the first one you can see there, which is a fairly self-explanatory, is something that we're picking up much more in Vietnam now, is that when you buy clothing products, it's this whole idea of that when you put makeup on or when you put clothing on, that you know, that is going to boost your confidence, or if you wear it or you put the makeup on, you do it in a sort of very confident way. Now, the other thing too that we're seeing much more of is these books here are kind of these are books which are all aimed at young women in Vietnam, and these books have only just been starting to come out sort of after 2000, because as I mentioned, Vietnam had been very much a closed society prior to the 1980s. And even when Vietnam opened up to globalization, the government was very, very concerned about, they actually called Western culture poisonous culture. And in some respects it is. And so there were lots of campaigns in the sort of late 90s and early 2000s about trying to get women to avoid this poisonous culture, which was mainly about sexual promiscuity and taking drugs was the two main things. So what you see in Vietnam is very interesting with these particular books, is that while they have this this positive psychological discourse flowing through them, it's a very kind of Vietnamized sort of example of that, insofar as they a really big focus in these books is what it's sort of saying to women is you can embrace both the kind of, you can be a modern globalized woman, but you can also still embrace Vietnam's traditional identity and Vietnam's traditional cultures, which is very much a kind of Taoist or Confucian approach. And so this is how these books are sort of different in a way to the types of positive psychology books you might see in the West, but you do still see this stuff kind of filtering down. And so for me and my researchers, we found that really interesting in that what it is a kind of hybrid version of positive psychology. By the way, and these books tend to not be so focused on commodification and consumer culture. They're more just straight up psychological books. Whereas as you can see from that advertisements, it's more down the track of trying to sell you something. I've just put a point there though, that what's interesting about these books is and this is where the discourse in Vietnam has changed. Once upon a time in Vietnam, particularly if you're a woman, your life would be about your family, and that that if there was ever going to be change in your life, that change would be something which the change would occur within the family, and you'd be taking the family along with you. Whereas that excellent point that you made before about individualism, we are seeing that much more now, that what these books are saying is that you are the change factor. And that is something that has changed in the last few years. One thing for me, and we were having this conversation at the beginning, is dating apps. Can I ask, are dating apps popular amongst young people for you guys? Is this something that is used a lot?
Yeah, I would say, yeah, dating apps are quite popular here also.
So one of the things we have is and again, this is quite different. I'm assuming, do you guys have Tinder? Is that something that's...
Yeah, we do.
You do, okay, all right. But what about, because one of the things that we're seeing now much more in Vietnam is these homegrown ones. And there's an example there called Fika. And again, you can see there that there is a focus on, I think back in the day when these things first started, they were just designed, you know, for people to meet each other and so on. But one of the big changes that we've seen is that there's much more of a psychological focus there. And so you can see here this idea about self-growth and sort of improving, you know, your self-esteem and your confidence and those things. And I noticed with this particular site in Vietnam, this Fika site, it has personality tests and all these sorts of things. So what we're seeing is much more of that kind of pop psychology stuff going on. And particularly what's interesting about personality tests is that the majority of personality tests were never designed to be used in this way. Personality tests were mainly designed for people suffering a mental illness and to try and understand where their strengths and weaknesses are. So we're seeing it a very different way. And also too, the test they have here is the 16 Cattell test. And it's been translated into Vietnamese. And so I find it really strange that there are so many concepts in those personality tests. I really don't know how they would properly translate into Vietnamese and whether they would work or not. But again, this is sort of one of the big differences here. I mean, basically saying that one of the ways that you find your soulmate is they're trying to move the focus away from just physical beauty to now pushing the focus towards it's your personality that is going to sell you. Like, you will find your soulmate, you will find the man or woman of your dreams through you guys having a similar personality, similar values, and those sorts of things. All right, so now, so I had a good deep dive, as you can see here. So I was looking at the Vietnamese material, looking at the Chinese material, but I've also been having a good deep dive into the Indian material. And so these are some of the things that I've sort of, I've found. So I think the first one there comes from, I think it was Vogue magazine. I noticed here, Ashley Graham. I'm not sure, she's someone well known. I think she was a model or something, but talking about her growing confidence, and then also to this sort of magazine. But is that something that you're seeing there in magazines? I'm not sure if any of you consume those glossy magazines, but if you do, is it something that you're seeing, again, these positivity discourses coming through more?
I mean, I do follow Vogue on Instagram. So I mean, I know what's going on. So like just for like updates and all. So not like a magazine that I read or something, but yeah, I do follow.
Well, look, actually, you make a very good point, and something that we haven't spoken about is that, so those authors that I mentioned before, Shani Orgad and Rosalind Gill, they're both media scholars, and what they're primarily interested in is the way that these things are transmitted from the global north to the global south through digital technology. So, and one of the things I was saying is that with the advent of digital technology, and particularly the fact that most of these types of magazines, they don't sell print copies anymore. It's mainly delivered online. What they were saying is that those online versions has meant that those magazines are worldwide. And so their content is merging much more. Whereas before you would have had, like, say, Vogue magazine, quite distinctive to each region or country of the world. So this is another important point that needs to be looked at here. Those positivity discourses now can spread around the globe much faster than they used to. So I'm just, please go ahead. Yeah.
In addition to that, I think we're seeing representation of different kinds of women, especially with magazines like Vogue and Femina. And I think that's also because of the rise of the digital age. The people who can gain following, or the people who are followed and the people who are influenced, are not just limited to print issues or magazines or businesses and organizations, but the entire process is democratized, which is why different kinds of people can showcase themselves. And that's why different body types are now celebrated and even represented on covers of magazines like this.
Yeah. And I think that that's the thing, you know, that point that I made at the beginning about being ambivalent is that, you know, digital technologies are really wonderful in that respect, in the way that they can do that. But one of the things that we found in our study on young women's use of Facebook in Vietnam, that Facebook was not really a tool for women's emancipation, because a lot of the people that viewed those, it was expected, again, this point that I made before, that yes, while it's okay for young Vietnamese women to embrace modern globalized views, they were also still expected to embrace those kind of more traditional feminine values as well. Like they had to be careful. And in fact, I would imagine, look, I'm not on Facebook or anything because I just don't have the time. But many of the young women we talked to in Vietnam said they actually had, say, 1 or 2 sites. In fact, many of them had 2. They had a public-facing one and then a one just for their friends. The public-facing one was the one that their parents could look at. And so, So again, I think this is the thing about digital technologies. While, as you're saying here, it gives us an opportunity to celebrate different body types, but there also tends to be a downside to that. But again, I think the main thing that I want to go back to here is, you know, how is all of this stuff changing women's sense of self and identity? Because I think that's the big question that we need to sort of look at here. All right. I was talking before, this guy, he's probably my favorite scholar of all time. I haven't been using his work much lately, but I think he's really wonderful. And I know that this is something that you guys have been looking at, is this idea of self-commodification. And Erich Fromm has this idea that, you know, human beings, and he was writing this back in the 1950s, that we have much more of this marketing orientation. And so, you know, we're seeing that now in the way that we're trying to cultivate this more positive body, more positive appearance. But he too was also very much about how psychology is now used to kind of increase our value in the marketplace. He was talking about it in 2 sort of areas. One was in the workplace, and the other was in terms of love, which I'll turn to in a moment. I have a definition of commodification there, but I get the feeling I don't need to sort of rehash that for you guys, because you know what I'm talking about there. But you know, this idea that, you know, we ourselves become a commodity that we sell out in the marketplace is a very recent thing. And again, one of the things is if you look at many of the kind of psychological distress that young people face nowadays, so much of it is about the way that we are now required to commodify ourselves. So in one sense, we're looking at positive psychology, but in the other sense, when we come to this issue about, well, how are these things changing our sense of self and identity? Well, it's also causing a lot of psychological stress. And I'll give you an example of this is that, you know, if for whatever reason, you're someone who is just not self-confident and you're not resilient, let's say you are a very sensitive person for whatever reason, you know, the world is becoming a harder place for you to live in because there is this expectation that you are resilient. And if you're not resilient, you could easily use that against yourself and say, well, you know, I am a defective person because I'm unable to be resilient. And so this is one of the issues that Erich Fromm was very concerned about when you start commodifying yourself. And because when you commodify yourself, the number one thing that you are doing is you are comparing yourself with everyone else. Now, it's normal and natural. We all go through a process of social comparison. That's normal. But we're talking about social comparison on a level now where it's very, very difficult for most of us to kind of look the way we want to. For example, you know, I would love to look like George Clooney. Do you guys know who George Clooney is?
They do.
They do, yeah, okay. And so, yeah, I would love to look like him, but I don't. And so this is part of the problem about commodification is that once upon a time when we would compare ourselves socially, we would compare ourselves to the people around us. But obviously with digital technology and the globalization of media, most of our comparisons now are upward comparisons to people that we could never be for whatever reason, whether we don't have the talent or we just weren't born genetically. You know, like I know, you know, George Clooney is a great looking guy and I'm not as good looking as him, but that was, you know, that was not something that I could control. That was just the way that I was born. And so, but yeah, so but we don't want to give ourselves a hard time about that if we can at all. I just want to come back to, just to finish off now, is just to talk about these dating apps, because I think, again, this is where Erich Fromm's work really comes into its own. If you can, I would say of all of Fromm's work, I would have to say his book, The Art of Loving, is definitely my favorite. And if you can ever get a copy of it, I suggest you do, because it's a very, very powerful book in terms of helping us to understand how to have good relationships with others. But one of the things is with the dating apps. Now, I've not ever used dating apps, but for me, I would almost be afraid to use them because, you know, particularly now, because I'm 50. You know, I'm not a young, beautiful, handsome guy like I used to be, and so for me, I would be so worried about being rejected or, you know, sort of based on my age and my looks, and so. For someone like me, going onto a dating app is actually quite scary. And this is one of the things that Erich Fromm was saying, is that we go to all this trouble to make ourselves lovable. And we make ourselves lovable because at the end of the day, again, we are turning ourselves into a commodity. And so we are, the way that we make ourselves lovable is we enhance our body. We buy the right clothes, we exercise, we diet, we do all of those sorts of things. But now on top of that, there are all of these psychic enhancements that we undertake. So now there's a double thing that we need to do. And so, and Fromm was saying, you know, this is a very dangerous territory to get into, because at the end of the day, we will never be able to, you know, scale the heights of some of the very beautiful people in the world and to try and sort of look like that. Also, too, what happens is love becomes a transactional thing. You know, it's like, what I'm bringing to the relationship is my good looks and my beauty and also my wonderful personality, you know. And so, you know, and he was sort of saying that, you know, love based on that type of transaction is unlikely to last very long. The other thing too, just one other point there, is the way that cosmetic surgery has now become normalized, because once upon a time, cosmetic surgery would only be undertaken for people who had, you know, if you were born with a congenital deformity or whatever it is. But now, you know, cosmetic surgery is very, very popular. This particular study by Levy, she was saying that, you know, one of the main reasons why women will undertake cosmetic surgery is because they see it as a tool for empowerment. They feel more empowered by the kind of the sort of bodily modifications that they want to make. All right, so just to finish off there, there's still a long way to go. So we're going to look at, and so this is why it's been really wonderful for me to talk with all of you today, because we want to continue on, and these are the questions we hadn't looked at. So, what are the types of practices and interventions? Most of them we see are based on cognitive behavioral therapy, if that's something that you know about. Also, too, do these sites have a balanced approach? Because we need to remember that positive emotions are great, but negative emotions can also be very powerful, because negative emotions really push us to make changes in our lives, which then may well have the effect of actually boosting our self-confidence. And that point that I alluded to before is like the role, how is the introduction of digital technologies also changing this particular situation? So anyway, that brings us to an end. I've got some references over the page, but you can check those out later. But but just on that note, is there any other questions or feedback or comments that people would like to make?
Rahul, like not an exact question, but I had something to ask. In like when you talked about body positivity on social media and the influence that has on people, and if it's positive or negative, I think that I was just going to point this out and ask you your view on it. It's the fact that when you promote body positivity, we are not, at least as teenagers, I don't believe that we are in a position in our life where self-love comes very easily. And we often tend to use consumer products in order to gain that love, which we don't often achieve. So I just wanted to ask, what do you think about the fact that we use this consumer culture, but the idea, even when there is body positivity in social media, I don't believe that the process of self-love is very easy. And it's not very easy to achieve. So what do you think about that?
Look, I agree wholeheartedly with you, because look, although a lot of my work criticizes consumer culture, if I'm getting what you're saying right, look, when I buy a new bicycle or a computer or stuff, that it does make me feel really good. I'm like everyone, and I agree. And I think that, look, the other thing too I should say is that, things, let's say, take a thing like makeup, right? You could have a very staunch and flexible attitude towards that. No, I'm not wearing makeup. It's just a big con. The consumer industry is trying to make me feel ugly and telling me I need to put this stuff on my face. Why can't I just show my face as it is? One thing that I would say is that, look, I think women look wonderful with makeup on. I think, it really enhances the way you look. And if you get a positive benefit for that, I think that's great. But I suppose the thing is, and I think this is where you guys are lucky in a sense, is that as long as we can maintain a critical attitude towards these things, is to know that, yes, while makeup gives us a short-term psychological boost, it's not something that's going to be a long-term strategy for what you're saying about self-love. And, when you're talking about young people, I have to say that, look, I'm 50 and I still have that problem, actually, it's not as bad when I was younger. I have to say that it was definitely more of an issue, like that you do get a bit more confident as you get older. But I don't know whether that's just part of the human condition or what it is. So I think let's not condemn these things outright, because they are really nice at times. But I think as long as we're not getting completely sucked into it. I think the other thing too, of course, is money. I'd imagine that must be a big issue, that people would love to buy these things or particular type of makeup. And so not having the money would be an issue. And so, like I wouldn't want to think that, and look, of course, young people are going to do it, but that it's sad in a way that many young people would love to have some of these nice consumer items, but would never have them. And I know that they must feel like they're missing out. So, but yeah, these are age-old questions which are difficult to answer, aren't they?
I had another question. So, as you just mentioned that self-love is very difficult to attain, and you yourself said that there's a lot of problems even later in life that you cannot complete, like people still can't get them to love themselves. So these days, cosmetic surgery seem not as a way to actually commodify yourself, but actually get closer to the type of body that you want and not what the society wants. Maybe if I have, say, if I want bigger lips on myself, I would definitely go for it because that would make me get closer to the kind of ideal self that I want. So how, like, where do we say, like, how much of, say, the cosmetic surgery business is commodifying ourselves, and how much is it getting us closer to the type of self that we want?
Yeah, look, wow, that's a wonderful question, because that's such a difficult question to answer, isn't it? You know, because when I was talking about cosmetic surgery there before, like, I do know, if those of you that know, like, body dysmorphic disorder is like a form of obsessive compulsive disorder. And I know that, you know, for some people, a small amount of cosmetic surgery has made a really big difference. But for some people, it hasn't. I think if you went into it with the idea that this is not going to be completely transformative, but if it's something that is bugging you and you want to do it, I think then, of course, the other thing is just to make sure that, you know, that you do it as safely as possible and that there aren't those kind of complications. Yeah. And again, look, it's a technology like any technologies, and we have these wonderful technologies available to us. And so, yeah, it's a hard question. Actually, just on that question, I wonder what your fellow students think of that, you know, because I think that's a good question for all of us, isn't it, really? You know, like, if we had the money and there was something about us we really wanted to change. I know this might sound strange to all of you, but, you know, when I grew up in Australia, like, being really white was a sign of, you know, it was, yeah, you didn't want to be white. You wanted to have dark tan skin. And so, yeah, so I know, like, you've got these skin lightening creams and all this sort of stuff. So yeah, I wonder what your fellow students think about those things, you know. I mean, I wish I could put on darkening stuff when I was a kid in Australia, because having a tan was considered to be very attractive, whereas someone who was really white like me was considered to be quite unattractive. And so, yeah, what are other people's thoughts about cosmetic surgery? I don't know whether we have enough time, but yeah.
5 minutes, so we can make it.
Okay, sure, yeah.
Okay, so my idea, so just on the idea of, for example, cosmetic surgery, self-love, all of that. So I think the moment you start looking at that idea, you start trying to strive for perfection, and you try to think of an idea of perfection. And now the problem with the idea of perfection is, I don't think it can always be achieved, because perfection is different in the eyes of different people. So now the problem comes is, while some people might have a certain idea of perfection, you meet a different demographic, they have a different idea of perfection. And now the problem comes is, wherever you reach, there's going to be another point always countering. And because of that, in the end of the day, if you want to be truly happy, the whole concept comes with, can you better yourself from the outside? Maybe not, maybe yes. But I think internally, you need, in the end, if you want the happiness, it has to come from the inside for sure.
And you know, that point that you make, many studies that have been done on people that have had cosmetic surgery, one of the things I'll often say is that, yep, it was really, really good, but it wasn't as good as I thought it was going to be, or they didn't quite get it right, or I ended up, yes, it changed my look in the way that I wanted, but not as much as I wanted. So you're right. And you know, perfectionism, yeah, if we're going to get into psychopathology here, again, with things like obsessive compulsive disorder, body dysmorphic disorder, they are kind of disorders of desire for perfection. And you're right, you know, yeah, it's something we can never achieve. You know, we have to let it go. But that point about cosmetic surgery, it's look, I wouldn't say it's a majority, but maybe just under 50% generally have it, and then they're not quite happy with it, and then they'll probably go for subsequent procedures. So yeah, it does tend to indicate that it's not always the solution that people would want it to be.
So, Matt, I just wanted to kind of quickly chip in, like with the example that Vedanti gave about cosmetic surgery can have positive, benefits to one's sense of self-image. So, I think the question lies in where we draw the line, right? It's like as you know, like as we all know, drugs are also used as a medicine, but drugs are also can be addictive. So it's all about how much we go and how much we indulge in that whole thing. But to certain extent, I think everything can be medicine. But if you want to use it, if you fall for the addiction to this, this is going to be difficult. But the problem in this case, what I see is that because cosmetic surgeries gives businesses, money or income, profit. Businesses would want you to keep consuming or keep taking cosmetic surgery. So it's a slippery terrain. Once you go in that slippery terrain, it's very difficult to stop at that balance and then return back, because you're just going to go down that hill most likely.
Yeah, hey, just one point on that. That's a great point to end on, because I'm just showing this publication here by Levy Rubin and Pusik. When they interviewed the women for that study, the thing that they said was, I'm going in for just 1 or 2 cosmetic surgery procedures. They actually looked down on the women who then had multiple procedures, and they saw that as a psychological illness. So it's interesting that within the group of people that have cosmetic surgery, there are, there's a kind of, there's a hierarchy there between those that are doing it for the right, authentic reasons, and those that actually become addicted to cosmetic surgery as well. So you're right. That's a big issue. But I think the number one thing for you guys is having a university education gives you the critical analysis skills to be able to sort of research that stuff and make the best decision that you can, because that's the other thing too, is that you want to be safe as well. So at least you guys are fortunate that you have the skills to research these things and check it out and make sure that everything's going to be okay and that you're going to get what you want, I suppose.
Super. So thank you, Matt. We are just about time. I really want to thank you on behalf of Krea that you have taken the trouble to give a comprehensive lecture and share your research. And I just wanted to ask, do you think that I can share this PPT that you shared with the class? Is it okay?
Of course, yeah, by all means. And look, please share my email address. If there's anything that I can share with you guys, I've got plenty of PDF books, or if you just want to email me and you got a question around, please go ahead and please email me. And then if you don't mind, I might ask a question back in return, because I'm very interested to actually kind of do a multi-country study if I possibly can. So by all means,
sure.
Go ahead and do that. But anyway, I just want to say, hey, thank you very much, and great questions too. I just want to say that you guys asked some really great questions today. So thanks for your participation.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. And I just wanted to indicate, I think our students would love to participate in your study if it's a multi. Again, I'm telling without asking their permission, but I hope most of them will like to participate, because I think these things are, at least what I realized while teaching this course, that they do reflect and they do see these things are like real issues in their life. So they are interested to talk more about it. Okay, thank you again, Matt.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, Matt. Okay, take care, everyone, and we'll talk to you soon, hey?
Have a nice evening. Bye.
Okay, bye from Vietnam.
See you.